can destroy us at a moment's notice.
I know he can.
All right. It's going to look like we're not on, but we will be. We are. Here we go. Let's record this for posterity.
She's my favorite person.
She's the only person that talks back to you.
I know.
That's why she's your favorite.
I think she also does AT&T. Oh, I'll tell you a great story about like early. I'll tell you later. No.
Well, hey everybody. This is the ramblings of Robin Robinson here today on It's the Liquor Talking. It's the Liquor Talking. No, listen, really, this is Robin. No, I'm not kidding you. You didn't tune in the wrong place. This is Robinson, the history of whiskey.
Yes.
Yes.
In 100 bottles, barrels. And this was the argument I had with the publisher. I wanted vessels. And somebody in the publishing house said, well, we don't like the word vessels. And so it went and more.
Okay, vassals.
Vassals.
There you go. Problem solved.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's always weird because we talked about this before. It's the history of whiskey, and you went with the E.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But we sort of like, a lot of people don't like that we put it in the E in parentheses, so it can be with an E or without an E. That really bothers a lot of people. You know what bothers the most? What? Publishers.
Oh, well, publishers hate it. Yeah. They don't want diacritical marks in their titles. Yeah. Unless it's the word F blank CK, then they can put that on the cover.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've seen that. Anybody see that book?
There's the perfect name for your book. Why didn't you go with that?
It was taken. Oh, like Robin Robinson was already taken.
How did you get away with that one? Anyways, we digress. Robin is here. He's a great book. If you haven't gotten it, you should get it this weekend. Here at Filio's. Yeah, that'd be great. And it's I love the stories. The stories are great. And you know, they're mostly true. No, they are true. I'm just teasing him.
They are true.
They are true.
Look, I've got 5 pages of bibliography in it.
Yay.
Yeah. Of course, I made all the references up too.
That's true. That's true too.
Right.
There's ways around that.
Yeah.
But that's the really cool is telling the story that way. And tonight, you're really going to sort of give us a sort of an abridged version of the history of whiskey in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bottles.
7 bottles. Yeah.
7 bottles.
And more.
And more. And more. All right. So first of all, what was the book's out. Everybody's enjoying it. People, I gave some for Christmas presents.
Yeah.
How has it been received, and why did you write the book?
Oh, well, it's a follow-up on my first book, which is the Complete Whiskey Course. It came out in 2000.
Wait a minute, if it's a Complete Whiskey Course, what do I need to know it? No.
Right, yeah, right. What else do you need to know? And it was sort of like my editor batted things back and forth. He came up with an idea, how about the history of whiskey? I said, okay, well, that's interesting, and I searched around. Anybody's writing about that. They were writing about Scotch whiskey. Someone's writing about bourbon. No one was taking the entirety of whiskey. And whiskey only goes back 400 or 500 years. So that means you have to go further and further and further back.
Right.
So when I proposed that idea, let's actually take this back to antiquity. Let's take it back to medicine, to the medieval alchemists, to the beginnings of distilling, to all of that. That's when we started coming up with like, well, what do we do that in? And 50, 75, he goes, well, I like the number 100. I said, okay, so let's pick 100 objects. They could be bottles, they could be barrels, they could be other objects, and each one of them would be a portal to somewhere on the arc. And that's pretty much how the book came together.
Nice.
Yeah.
I didn't know, like a lot of times it's sort of like a sort of obscure how guys come to write about something, but I like the fact that it was sort of like, all right, if we're going to tell the story, where do we start? Because there's a lot of places that you could start this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I started at the beginning. Actually, the first object in here.
Charlie was there.
Yeah. Right. Charlie was there. Right. Yeah. He was responsible for it. Right.
Charlie. He's not, you notice he's not like saying, no, I wasn't.
No, he's not denying it.
He's not denying it.
The first object in the book is the pot.
Right.
because it all starts with a pot. And when you think about where did the pot start, the pot started as a depression in a rock, holds rainwater. I can take things and mash things up in it. And then as it gets more sophisticated, now I'm taking more than one thing and putting it in there and combining it, and then it gets the heat of the sun, and then as the eons go by, and then we start seeing that multiple things that go in the pot create something completely different.
Right.
And when you look at that, that's essentially
it's almost the beginning of alchemy, right? I mean,
that's the beginning of alchemy. That's today's mash bill.
Right.
You know, it's essentially, so that's where I kept going. How do I get, where do we go back to?
Right.
You know, back to copper, you know, back to, you know, a still over here. Well, we're actually, I'll cover that in here. There's actually historical, archaeological, and anthropological background for all of that. And every one of them proves that whiskey is sometimes a catalyst to history, sometimes an observer to history. It's rarely in the forefront, except like maybe in the past 100 years, but it always was back there as part of the historical larger picture. And every time I started digging in, I would look at something, I'd say, okay, I think I know where the story is. And I'd go down in there and say, oh, wait a minute. No, the story's like way over here.
Yeah, rabbit hole.
Well, I tried to avoid the rabbit holes. There's so many books on rabbit holes there, and rabbit holes aren't interesting. It's the rabbit hole itself, not what's in the rabbit hole, that was interesting. So I tried to keep it on a level where it's rooted in absolute understanding and knowledge.
Okay.
But we're telling stories, you know, and stories.
Isn't that really the history of whiskey? Of whiskey too? It's story.
It's storytelling.
Because it's communal. It's
100%, and that's typically what got people into it as well. You know, and not only that, but I always make the argument that stories is what defines us as like Homo sapiens, as humans, and it's hardwired into our DNA. We are a species of storytellers. And when you go back to your earliest time in life, what was the thing that kind of got you focused? Was someone said, let me tell you a story. When you're a little baby, you're a little kid, and as you grew up. And then that's how we learned. And we learned through stories. And then facts are underneath it to give the story solidity and to give it a definition and meaning. But, you know, yeah, so it was the balance of that. You know, how do I keep this as storytelling but still have it rooted in fact?
Oh,
you know,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I would, my problem is I would start somewhere and I just would end up in completely different wrong place, because I would just like, you gotta almost pull yourself back and go,
well, are you kidding? Well, yes.
So, I gotta keep on this,
right.
You know, I gotta keep on this path.
So
otherwise it's just gonna be a tree branch.
Well,
going everywhere.
Here's what I learned. My first book, The Complete Whiskey Course, it was a compendium of whiskey from all over the world at that given time, 2019, right? My publisher said, you got 50,000 words. I handed in 150,000 word manuscript.
That's called a tome.
Yeah, right. And he goes, do you know how much editing is going to have to be done here? I said, well, aren't you the editor? Sure. He goes, do you remember when you signed your contract, you wanted to have the last voice in the book? You're the editor. So he took a hand grenade and threw it in the middle of the manuscript and blew it into 1,000 pieces. And I spent the next 7 months recombining it and cutting it down until it got into its form.
Right.
I learned an enormous lesson about something that writers understand about how to kill your darlings. And your darling is that beautiful sentence, that gorgeous paragraph. No, I got to get rid of it. It
doesn't work.
I got to get rid of it. Right. And so a lot of that stuff was actually on an editing room floor. I was given 50,000 words, 100 stories. Okay, 500 words a story. Yeah, I can keep to that. Yeah,
okay, yeah.
So that's where
you created your own. You had to sort of create your own path, or even cage. How do I treat my own cage so I don't start wandering off?
It literally was a cage. I really had to have guardrails all over the place. Yeah. Otherwise, I just start writing all kinds of goofy shit. But you know,
I've read some of your goofy shit.
Yeah,
you know too, though. I gotta tell you,
people who've seen my writings know that. Yeah, Robin can get some.
Yeah, I can go off the deep end.
Yeah, right. But yeah,
that's what I love about it too. Though.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you do
I
that.
tried to get down further enough in the rabbit hole, because in the introduction I said I had two people on my shoulder. I had the geek, and then I had the person who just says, I want something smooth in a story. And both of them are on both shoulders. And I'm navigating this with both of these people, kind of like, with.
That's a really interesting point, because I just recently I realized somebody on like Threads of all places. I don't know how I got down. It was either that or Reddit. I mean, there's two places. Don't ever go.
Oh, please.
Don't even ever go there. Right. Because you just read something, you go, "Oh my God, what the hell's wrong with this person?" But it was
they're on Reddit.
They're on Reddit. There you go. But it was a legitimate question, and then where it went to people answering it, and then all of a sudden I realized we're in this industry. We are, and you guys are all like you're fans, and you drink and you talk, and we're still in this tiny bubble of, we talk about jargon and how jargon can be confining.
Yeah.
And who are we going to let know our jargon?
Yeah.
Because as soon as it gets out, we feel invaded.
Yeah.
But everybody has to know the jargon, because we can't communicate with everybody if everybody doesn't know the jargon.
And unless we tell a story.
Right.
And
I got it. Oh, good. Yeah.
And that's just it. That's where the story comes in, because the story does replace jargon. Jargon takes us down into these things where, here's one of the things I knew. I was with Compass Box for many, many, many years. I've traveled all over the United States. I've worked 34 different markets. I was with other brands. I've tasted people, over tens of thousands of people. The number one feedback I got from across the land is people apologized for not knowing how to taste the whiskey. And because they felt that you had to be some sort of a connoisseur.
Right.
It's
a secret.
It's a secret. And it's kind of like,
they don't know the secret, and they don't want to feel stupid because they don't know the secret.
And one of the reasons is because Americans do not have a vocabulary for flavor. Our connection with food was utilitarian. Mm-hmm. Eat the damn stuff, get up and go out and either play, or if it was 200 years ago, get up and cut down a tree and build a house.
Right.
So food was fuel. So to sit around and to talk about the niceties, the nuances, all of the elegance of that was something that we actually had tried to leave behind with our European roots, right? As we went, I'm from Pittsburgh, so we were the edge of I know I'm in Boston, but we were at the edge of the frontier, right? And it's a working class town, so food was completely held in a completely different way. The 21st century, when whiskey had its renaissance, all of a sudden we had the internet. We found all of these nuances, and then people started diving down in there. But for the most part, most people are left behind on that, and they feel like there's something I don't know. And part of our job, and this is really part of the book's job, is to expand that. Say, yeah, you do know that, and there's a fun part of this too.
Right.
And so don't worry about what that tasting note is. I never give tasting notes. I don't like tasting notes. Tasting notes is an imposition of my subjective mind on yours. And who am I to tell you what it is that you taste?
And plus, we were just talking about this in even the last one, is like, your pleasant tasting note is somebody else's nightmare.
Right. Exactly.
You know what I mean? That
and
brings up a different memory.
Right. And then someone feels, okay, well, gee, I don't really know what I'm doing. No, you do know what you're doing. It's just that the only tasting note I never accept is, it tastes like the bottom of the dumpster behind the Chinese restaurant. Anything north of that is good tasting.
You know that for a fact.
Okay, look, yeah.
Look up, Sharon. I got that. Yeah. The authorities will be coming to see you soon.
But all of those, and the other thing is, once you get into this and you start, you start interviewing, I've interviewed blenders and distillers from all over the world, and our tastes, the back of our tongue and our olfactory all meet together in our limbic system in our brain, and that's the center of our memory and of our emotion. So everyone has that connection. We've got 30 people in this room. There are 30 different memories here. And that's really what makes it fabulous. And that's what makes everybody's tasting note their own individual one, so yeah. And that's one of the things I think everybody in the industry really needs to be that has to be incumbent upon them to actually get that message out there. And too often we get lost in the quote unquote marketing.
Yep.
People who've never tasted whiskey and never met a customer are writing all of these tasting notes. And then they actually send people out there saying, well, it's this, this, and this, and this. And someone comes across it and said, well, I didn't get that, so I must not know what I'm
I know what I'm
about.
doing, right?
Yeah.
The only thing the only instruction that I give people that because they want to do stuff, and I've talked about this several times, even this week, is smell everything. When you eat, just that utilitarian thing, just smell it.
Just smell
it.
Yeah.
Like take the time to register what that smells like, because you'll start finding these. You have to build a vocabulary for yourself.
That's exactly.
And it's not for anybody else.
Not for anyone else. Yeah.
For yourself. So like
you've got
all the time I go like, oh, I don't know what that is. I know that flavor, but I can't place it. That's where you got to try to get over.
The tasting wheels are really good for that. That can actually give me a word to this thing that I've been smelling. But Rachel Berry, you know, the fabulous master blender from Benriach, she once told me, she goes, you should smell everything, and everybody has a spice cabinet in their home. So you go in and you spend 10 minutes just kind of going through the spice cabinet and just smell this. Ah, that's coriander.
Right.
Okay. Okay, that's basil. Right. Yeah. And then, it imprints in your mind. Yeah. And, and you've got good smells and bad smells, and,
And some people's good smells are some people's bad smells.
Yeah.
So there you go. It's everybody's bad smell. All right. So what are we going to do here,
all right,
Robin?
So we're going to kind of go through a tasting of some selected, and I want to thank all of the sponsors who donated the bottles for me to take these around. With the book signings that I do, I like this to be a whiskey tasting as well, because so we can actually kind of make some connections. So we've got 7 things here we're going to talk about, and this is the this will be the lineup. Oh, you haven't seen anything yet. I mean, wait, I spent a lot of time working on my
somebody learned PowerPoint. Yay.
Hey, look, I came out of the tech industry where PowerPoint was our way of life, and I brought it into
my daughter looks at it and goes, oh, really?
Yeah, really? Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, wait, you ready for this?
I'm waiting.
There's number 1. Right. And so we're going to start off with a little bit.
I haven't seen a good one like this.
Dude, you have not seen anything yet. Wait. Okay. Number 2 is it gets even better. Yeah. Okay. Right. That'll be our first American whiskey, our second American whiskey right here. This is actually telling a story of the Mennonites. And then we are going to actually go to Scotland about how they solved a revenue problem at a very specific distillery. And then we're going to talk about smugglers, about the history of smuggling and actually how that fits into the entire whiskey story. And then at one point, Canada almost ruled the world, and not a lot of people really give them credit for this. And then the last one is after 3,000 years, whiskey finally comes back home to the area, into the area of the world where distillation started. Yeah.
All right. You guys ready to taste some history?
Good. Let me give you a little bit of a background. This is about 5 minutes on this before we get into the tasting. Okay. Just to kind of go, if you take a look at that thing over there, that is a pot still. Okay. Where does this come from? It's an alembic, right? Alembic is Arabic for alembic. Alembic means pot, right? So this is pretty much where this comes from, right? So it goes all the way back to the Egyptian times. Right. Now, what they were doing was that they were the first compounders. They were taking different elements and actually putting them together, and then they put them in this magical pot, and they allowed heat to actually separate them as well. And one of the things that they made was something called antimony. And if you look at any Egyptian depiction, they have these black marks around their eyes. That was antimony. That was a medication that they created in this pot, and that was to help them prevent sea blindness and desert blindness, right?
Which is just the reflection off.
Exactly. And guess what? It's actually quite popular, isn't it? Right? Because we still do it today. Right. But bad news for them, it was lead based. They didn't know that. So it was actually,
I don't know why this water is killing me. What's that cup made out of, sir?
Yeah.
Lead.
So what happens is this is the beginning of this idea. I can bring things together in a pot. I can make something quite different. And then I actually have now a use of this, right? Then you pop a couple thousand years into the future from there. And right about the time of the classic Greeks, Aristotle was doing a type of distillation. Distillation is to separate and purify. That's the definition of it. He was taking big sea sponges, soaking them in water, out on a ship, suspended above a barrel, and then allow gravity, the heat of the sun, and the motion to actually distill. So he was actually desalinating seawater. This was the idea. He knew that I can actually pull this apart. Okay, so that goes back then. Then around the Egyptians, the Arab culture grows up around them. What they see is this idea of this black paint around my eyes created from this compounding methodology. And in Arabic, to blacken is al-kul. And that's where we get the word alcohol from. So now we're starting to see people are starting to look at this from a completely different perspective. That area of the world, right, becomes the center of all Western knowledge. Okay, in what is now the Middle East and Egypt and the Arab countries right there, and then they move out into as they get religion, and they are bringing their religion to different parts of the world. They're also bringing this magical pot. Right now, they bring this magical pot in which they can take the four elements of the ancient world: earth, wind, fire, and water, and turn it into something else. And that's when they put the alembic on top of it. They're bringing their religion, they bring mathematics, they bring astronomy, and then they bring this magical pot. They bring it into Southern Europe. Southern Europe, at this point, this is the 9th century. This is an unholy mess, right? Roman Empire had been gone for hundreds of years. The Byzantine Empire had been split up. As you can see here on this map, it's nothing but raiders from one group of another. The Franks, who actually owned most of Europe, and they were the worst. The Franks, when they would conquer you, and then they would insult you. They would say, I am taking your
English bedwetting
yeah, I am taking your village, and you dress like a peasant, and that's because they were ruled.
Please send all hate mail to Robin Robinson at
Well, one of the reasons they were ruled by, and they were ruled by like Charlemagne, for example,
right?
And this is the wrong Charlemagne. This is Charlemagne the God. I meant actually Charlemagne the king, but they were both actually quite frank when it came down to it. Yeah. Oh God, I worked really hard to put that pun in there. Okay,
that was a long way around for that pun, brother.
I know.
That was a long trip. I think we went to Europe to go to that pun.
But who gets a hold of this magic pot? The only people in that area of the world who could understand that, which was the only class of people who were able to read, and that was all of the monks of the fated Byzantine Empire. They're the only ones that are able to understand this transformational thing. So it comes into their hands, right? And then you start seeing right around when the first millennium. Right, that's when you start seeing somebody. What's the monk have a lot more of than anything else? Time on their hands, right? So they take this magical pot and they're working with this. And the other thing that they have a lot of is wine, right? That's the entire Holy Roman Empire is wine, right? So now someone had the idea of putting wine in that pot and making a separation with that. That's where we first start getting our first brandies. Right there, okay? And then essentially takes place in an area of Gascony that we now know is where Armagnac comes from, right? Then from there, you start seeing all these distillations that happen up into the Caucasus Mountains. It's called Voda, which means water of life as well. And then
it's eau de vie, right?
And eau de vie in France, and then right? It would be Ishkaba, then Ushkaba, and then whiskey from there. And then you see, and then all of a sudden, the big transformation is in 1830 when the coffee still gets patented, and that's sort of like the iPhone of distillation, because that was the complete game changer right there. So that's the beginning, right? So that's actually what we're going to do is just taste through these. And I want you just to pick up your Armagnac and smell it and really enjoy this for what this is. For those of you who don't know what Armagnac is, it is a brandy that comes from a specific AOC in France, the Gascony region, the Armagnac region. It's to me, it's like one of the most beautiful things in the world. And it's one of the early crossovers from medicine into, or actually from all of these compounding into medicine. This is really where medicine really gets its start. And one of the stories is this one monk, his name was a Prior Dufour. He came up with 40 different things to do with this fire water that they were making, aguardent in Latin. 40 different. And one of the things is this: if one adds herbs, it extracts their virtues and makes redness disappear and heat in the eyes. Frequent anointment of a paralyzed member will render it to its normal state. And about 80, yeah, right? And we've all been there, right? And about 80 years later, in the area of Navarre, Charles the Bad is in really, really, really bad physical health. And taking from Prior Dufour's, 40 different things, the monks wrap his body up in cloth soaked in this aguardente. Unfortunately, someone may have been smoking nearby. And this poor guy burns to death, right? Okay, so that's why there's no smoking in hospitals, because of that, right? So that is the beginning right there. That's really where we start seeing the transformation of this, into all of these different uses. This is the beginning of what we call aquavita right there. And that's the beginning right there.
Anybody who's had Armagnac before?
Oh, yeah, this group
okay,
here, this group, I'm sure that
Armagnac is really, if you're into whiskeys, Armagnac is natural. It's such a natural place to go.
It's absolutely, and I don't want to tell anybody about this because the prices will go up, but it's literally the best price value thing on the market right now, as everybody knows, right? So, and this is from
now they do.
What's that?
Thank you.
Now you do. Now
you do.
Oh, it's all over TV. Sorry.
Yeah. Now,
right.
Don't worry. The two people watching won't.
This is d'Artigalon. This is actually one of the oldest houses in Gascony that was making this. They were first a wine house, and then they eventually became a brandy house as well. So I adore this. This is an XO, so this is 10 years old and 10 years and more. Yeah, Charlie.
No, because there's some of these things are actually pretty. He's got a couple in here that are pretty difficult to get.
Yeah,
but important for his the journey.
Yeah,
that is.
Yeah, that is. Yeah,
that is.
Yeah, that got literally pulled from the shelf.
And so's the last one.
Yeah. Too. So now we kind of progress through history with this right now. And then we have and what eventually happens is Charlemagne becomes like the first Holy Roman Emperor. And he spreads this whole idea of that church, of the Holy Roman Empire. That becomes the dominant force all through Europe at that point. And there was no one else to challenge that until Martin Luther takes a hammer and puts 90 different, arguments on the church, on the door of a church in Germany, in Wittenberg, and that starts the Protestant Reformation. And the way that I look at the Protestant Reformation is that there was this lovely mirror that only showed one image, and now you actually have 100,000 different images. It's just like that mirror fell on the wall, fell on the floor, and shattered into 1,000 pieces. And this is what it looks like. This is essentially a graphic of what Protestantism looks like from all of it spread out, right? And this becomes really where the journey into rye whiskey comes from, because this is where the rise of the Mennonites happen. Now, who are the Mennonites? That's this group right here. They come off of the Reformed Church, and then from there they become a group called the Anabaptists, and none of them were welcome in Europe. So they were actually forced to leave. They weren't allowed to join craft unions. They weren't allowed to actually make livings. So they actually made livings as either as farmers, as tavern keepers, right? And they adopted distilling because distilling from them was different than the Calvinists. The Calvinists said everything you do is bad, you're going to go to hell. What the Anabaptists said is like, it's a choice. I make a choice of what I want to do and what I don't want to do. And as they come into the United States, they're kicked out of Boston, they're kicked out of New York, and then suddenly this guy named William Penn said, hey, I just got a big tract of land on the other side of the Delaware River. I don't care what you believe, you can come on over here. And they all ended up finding their way into Pennsylvania. So now the Mennonites are into Pennsylvania, right? They are now an offshoot of the Anabaptists, and from them are the offshoot of the Amish. And when growing up in Pittsburgh, we referred to them all as the Pennsylvania Dutch, right? But they were actually German and Swiss and those, and they looked at farming and distillation as two things of the same thing. And so they became the distillers. And one of the first distillers was this guy named John Schenck. And that's your number one right over here. This is Schenck's whiskey. Now, this is a Kentucky sour mash whiskey. It is not a rye. It is actually a very, very high rye sour mash. I'll explain to you in a second. But this is an homage. In 1753, he starts this farm. He actually starts distilling from there. They start selling it to other people. It actually becomes very, very well known. Who was another famous Mennonite of that time? Right? Jacob Oberhauser later changed his name to Overholt, right? The first commercial distillery, the first commercial whiskey in the United States in Western Pennsylvania from where I'm from, right? Another one was Jacob Boehm, right? Who ends up coming down the Cumberland Trail into Kentucky, changes his name to Beam, right? So you see where the Mennonites actually become what from this sort of religious offshoot, right? They become like the progenitors of what we know about rye whiskey, right?
Is that because they were so into farming, and the only way to, like, you know, preserve crops at the end was to actually turn it into alcohol?
That's exactly right. Yeah, as a matter of fact, and when we look at, you know, the history of distillation, there's the farmer, there is the distiller, and then there's the taxman. What happens was the distiller ends up turning the farm product into a product more valuable than the product in the field, whether it be barley, whether it be rye, whether it be corn. And when you do that, then the government, the king, the prince, or someone can say, wait a minute, there's money on the table here, right? And that's when the tax man comes in all those forms. And I make the argument that the tax man is more responsible for the flavor of the whiskey in your bottle than any other entity.
Especially in Irish.
Any of the Western, right? So when you Scotland, Ireland, Canada, and the United States, someone that always got their hand in your back pocket is going to force you to innovate. It's going to force you to change. It's going to force you to move and do other things. And when you start looking at like all the malt taxes and all the things that actually made these distillers change what they did in order to avoid the tax, right? So the tax man has this marvelous, incredible impact, and we don't give the tax man enough.
I still don't like him.
Yeah, right.
All right, is it okay? I didn't say that on. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. Yeah, now you don't like. Now they've got them again.
Yeah, I know.
Right.
Really.
So,
Thanks.
So what happened was, Schenck has the farm for actually almost 80, 90 years. One of his later generations is named Baumberger, who is also a Mennonite. And then he buys the farm, and this now becomes the Baumberger Distillery, right? And Baumberger's goes on all the way until Prohibition, right? And then, of course, everything shut down with Prohibition. After Prohibition was over, right, they sold it to this company called Penco. All right, and Penco bought this right about the time of repeal, and they're making all types of alcohol, not necessarily anything particular. They made blends, they made rye. That they were adapting to the taste of that time period, and then Penco went on until the 1970s, and it got bought by a guy named Lou Foreman. And Lou Foreman buys this and he goes, you know what? I've got two sons. One's named Michael, one's named Peter. I'm going to actually put those together and I'm going to create this other new company called Michter's. And this is where Michter's now comes from. It comes from this same entire heritage. Michter's sticks around until the end of the 80s, and that's when they had the entire whiskey, all fell into the cellar, and then the name stuck was just sitting there until Joe Magliocco in New York bought the name for like $450 and revived Michter's. And what he did was he eventually moved the entire operation, which is now in Kentucky. And what he did was he created both the Shanks and the Baumburgers in a Kentucky style, but as an homage to the Shank and the Baumburgers families. So one of these is a Kentucky sour mash. The other one is a Kentucky straight bourbon with high rye mash bill in each one of them. So yeah, so enjoy those separately as they are. And what's really wonderful about them is that they're one of the few people who are actually kind of like looking back at that history. Anybody been to Fort Nelson yeah. So if you go down to Fort Nelson, they have the old stills from the original Michter's distillery that they moved in there. And they have a really marvelous timeline up on the wall that actually kind of runs this entire thing down for them too. So it's a great way to kind of like reconnect with really how this all got there. And the Overholts were another one too, right? The Overholts, Western Pennsylvania, stuck around for a long time. Eventually, they went down. They got purchased by Beam. Beam got purchased by Suntory. And now what they're doing now is they're reviving the entire original rye mash bill, which was 100% rye, 20% malted rye, 80% unmalted rye. And that's actually the new Monongahela mash, because it was on the Monongahela River down there. The Monongahela River for rye whiskey is what the Spey River was for Scotch whiskey, because they were both the gathering places where all of these distilleries actually kind of showed up there and really kind of popularized both of those different kinds of whiskeys.
Yeah, I don't think everybody realized really where rye was like sort of king. I mean, it really came all the way up here too, because you could grow rye.
It grows. It grows
grow anywhere
in cool climates. Right. Yeah, exactly. In New York State, they actually have something called Empire Rye, which they got an official state designation for it. So the distilleries in New York State, they're distilling something called Empire Rye, and they've got very specific regulations around what that is that kind of give that style of whiskey its own designation there, which is cool. But yeah, I mean, rye was dead. When I was growing up in Pittsburgh, rye was what there was Seagram's 7, and the bartender would call it rye. No one knew any better, right? Everyone thought, well, rye's Canadian, right?
Right.
But
I mean, even Canadian whiskey today in some places is just called Canadian rye. There's no rye in it.
No, well, actually, you can have up to.
No, but like I'm saying, don't even have anything in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just called because that's what they're used to.
That's what they're used to. Yeah, exactly. And then, actually, well, MGP is another story about that. Actually, MGP was an old Seagram's distillery that got the taste of rye back in our mouths as modern people again, right? The 95.5 mash bill from that, and that was Redemption, and that was early High West, and all of those guys that came there and bought those barrels and kind of revived the whole idea, the rye revival.
Dave Smear is coming tonight too.
Oh, Dave! Oh, great, yeah. Good, yeah. And Dave was like, one of the Dave, and then Amir PA from Pepper. Yeah, and Pepper 1776. They were some of the first guys to go in there, buy these barrels for like pennies on a dollar at MGP. That was back when
couldn't give it away.
Yeah, couldn't give it away then. Yeah, right. So that's these two right here. That takes us like kind of through rye and its beginnings, and Oh, look at that. You see that transition? That was awesome, right? All right. So now, when you talk about Scotch whiskey for the entirety of its existence, this guy down here in the bottom right, Andrew Usher. Andrew Usher is considered the father of Scotch whiskey because he was the first guy. He was actually, excuse me, the independent agent that had access to Glenlivet. And he was pulling Glenlivet out of the Highlands. But it was rough, harsh, and he's the one that solved the problem. So many blenders in Scotland today will look at Andrew Usher, and actually his son Andrew, as really this was the person who really kind of brought our art form together by trying to solve the problem of flavor and taste of all these rough things. And then after that, it all became about blends. Right. So what did the Irish not do? They didn't accept the coffee still, even though it was it was patented by one of their own. Aeneas Coffee couldn't sell it to the Dubliners. They thought it was akin to poison. So he went over to Scotland. Scotland said, yeah, man, hell yeah, bring it on. And they bring the coffee still in. And that means I can blend this stuff right here. So the coffee still makes really, really light grain whiskey, right? Distilled very high, right?
Without having to distill it.
Without having to redistill it. Exactly.
Now that's a big point.
Think about that from an artistic perspective. It's essentially the distiller's white. So what does an artist do? Artist has 4 or 5 main primary colors. But when you add white into that, you extend the entire palette of your colors, right? That's essentially what grain whiskey does for malts. And now Buchanan's, Cutty Sark, Chivas, right? Dewar's, Johnny Walker, all of these blends this is what dominates. This is the domination of Scotch whiskey in the world. And each one of these has their own individual. The story of Tommy Dewar, who is probably the greatest whiskey salesman of all time, because he's the first guy that said, oh, I'm going to take these brand new, because what happened when you, back in the day, his father, John Dewar, had a grocery store. And in the grocery store, you had all of your barrels of different whiskeys back there, and he would blend it for you. But you would come with your own container, fill up the container, and take it back home. Tommy Dewar takes over the company and goes, that shit ain't going to work, because no one's going to know it's my father's whiskey when they take it home in their own jug. At that same time, the Ashley bottle machine was made that actually now made bottles in a manufactured way, made them cheaper. Now, Tommy Dewar says, nothing is coming out of here except if it's in a bottle, and I'm putting my dad's name on it, and I'm going to put a Scotsman on there so people know that it's coming from Scotland. And that's when whiskey from Scotland became Scotch whiskey. So he's the first one. When you look at any shelf, when you look at any back bar, he was the first guy that says, this is a billboard. This is advertising. This is actually how I get my name out there, greatest whiskey salesman of all time. So all of these guys are making VAT 69, right? You don't see that much anymore, but this is the first guy that actually determined and wrote it down that whiskey aged in a sherry barrel was better than the other ones because of the 100 different samples that he had. All of his tasting panel liked the stuff that was in VAT 69 the most, and that was actually the one that actually had the sherry barrel. Yeah, right. And you can never underestimate the sweet tooth of people. So up against that, right, all of a sudden in the 1890s, there is this massive rash of new distilleries that open up, right? And one of them was a guy named William Grant. He's got 9 sons, and between all of them, they put together this distillery in this area called the Valley of the Deer, or Glenfiddich, and he names his whiskey Grant's Stand Fast. And what was he standing fast against? He was standing fast against these guys, the DCL, the Distillers Company Limited. This is the first monopoly. This is the Haig family. This is the Steen family. And they gather all of these other families together. And eventually they get bought by Guinness. And eventually they become Diageo. This is the ultimate in corporate monopoly right here, right? And so he creates this whole idea of a whiskey, against them. And for years, and today, William Grant and Sons is nowhere near the DCL. So they've been fighting off the DCL for over 125 years, right? And they still are standing fast. So they, of course, are making their whiskey in blends. Anybody who's had Grants or anybody who's had Bells and things like that, again, they are part of the blending tradition. And then suddenly in the 1960s, I'm not getting any orders for our malt. And neither is that guy over there, and neither is that guy over there, and neither is that guy over there. We're not selling our malt to the blenders. The blenders are not buying it. Why is that? Because nobody is drinking Scotch whiskey anymore, right? Why isn't anybody drinking Scotch whiskey anymore? That's because of this, right?
That American Russian.
The American Russian, exactly. So essentially, maybe the one most brilliant marketing of all time, it leaves you breathless, right? Because what they did was they undermined the whole gin thing and the whiskey thing, because you couldn't go out and have a three martini lunch and come back stinking like gin, but you can go out and have a 3 vodka martini lunch and come back and no one knows that you were out there drinking. Next thing you know, you've got James Bond making a martini with vodka and then shaking it, and then now they're putting in vodka and everything, from beef bouillon into
I have the recipe for that.
Yeah, right. And Bloody Marys and everything, and then you got these 4 women that are running around New York City looking for sex and good shoes, and everything they're drinking is everything they're drinking is a martini, right? So suddenly vodka, and then my generation grows up, whiskey was an old man's drink. I don't want to go drink with the old men, right? So we're going to drink vodka. We're going to drink the brand new California varietals called Sauvignon, and Merlot and all of these words that we had to learn. And when the first Smirnoff came off the line in the United States, they made a manufacturing mistake, and they had whiskey tops that were screwed onto the top of it, right? So all of these come off there, and on the tops it says whiskey, and Smirnoff is owned by Hugh Blind at the time. They said, we're not missing a beat. They marketed it as white whiskey. As white whiskey, right? And then because Americans didn't know what vodka was. Americans had no idea what vodka was. So all of a sudden, vodka takes over this entire generation, right? No one's drinking whiskey.
Alcohol delivery system.
Yeah, exactly. So somebody over at the Grant family says, well, we got to do something about this. And that was William Grant's great-grandson, this guy named Sandy Grant Gordon. He goes, well, what would happen if we just took all of our malt, because we've been selling our malt out to people around the neighborhood and around the region. They'll come and buy some bottles. They'll come and buy some barrels. But what would happen if we actually commercialized this and sold it everywhere? He went around, just like Tommy Dewar did, 85 years before him. He went all over the world and popularized this whole idea about it's just malt whiskey in a bottle. That is it. There's no grain whiskey. There's nothing in there, and it all comes from our distillery. Did that make a little bit of a revolution? Yeah, I think so, right? So that was the very first. This is 1963 this happens, right? 1963, it's called straight malt. Then it went to all malt, and then eventually what we have is the single malt. And now we have Brian Kinsman, who is their master blender, their malt master. And what he's done is he took a look at the old recipes and recreated it. So there are these malts out there. That's not the one that they were able to actually hand to me. We actually have to settle for a 21-year-old malt. So that's what you have right here. This is number 4. Number 4 is our 21-year-old malt right here. And this is actually done in a reserve rum cask finish. Glenfiddich Grand Reserve right here. It's a gorgeous whiskey, but it kind of gives you an idea about where this heritage of single malts come from, right? Single malts is all that anybody can think of anymore, but remember, it wasn't around until 1963, and these guys were the first.
But even still, even in Scotch whiskey now, right? I mean, it's 90% is still sold worldwide. Is still
as a blend.
As a blend.
The blends are the anchor of the industry.
But when I started before when I started, it was 95% though.
Oh, it was. It's because single malts have caught on. Yeah, exactly. And of course, now you've got like let's say like Glenmorangie we were talking about. Glenmorangie, because they are owned by LVMH, because they are literally the luxury. They don't have to sell their malts into blends.
Right.
They are 100% everything from Ardbeg, everything from Glenmoe goes right into bottles. And so that's become more of a thing now. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it went from 95 to about 90%, but that's still quite a thing. High. So that's actually, that's a beautiful whiskey, right? I mean, it's nice. really gorgeous. Yeah. Yeah.
We couldn't find the one that said whiskey.
Yeah. I thought it was best just to talk about it, not taste it. Right. Yeah. Of course, you can't really taste it, can you? Yeah. Oh, yes, you can. So that kind of brings us into this new era of kind of like how whiskey kind of traveled, that story. Now let's go back again, a couple hundred years again, right? And we get the idea of whiskey was illegal. If you were in Scotland and you were making whiskey, you were doing something against the king's wishes for two reasons. Number one, I can't get a tax from it. And number two, you're threatening businesses that I actually endorse, says the king, right? So smuggling, in the British Isles, smuggling becomes a way of life. And it doesn't matter if it's whiskey, it could be leather, it could be grain, it could be any kind of goods. The whole idea of the British Isles is to get it from this point to this point without anybody from the king's revenue agents knowing anything about it. And that, of course, meant whiskey as well. Now, if you were legitimate and you see this barrel over right here, and I'm moving goods in that barrel, well, that barrel's really big. It's very heavy, right? And that means it's going to take a couple guys to actually do it. I'm going to need a winch to get it up on a wagon. That's a problem because that is going to attract attention. That means I got a gauger coming over there who wants to know what's inside the barrel, okay? That's a problem. Not very good for a smuggler. They came up with this idea of anchors and tubs. These are 8-gallon barrels that are actually made flat, right? And you can then wear them strapped around. One guy can wear 2 of these. On a horse, you can put 4 of them. And now, because I'm up in the glens and the valleys of the highlands, I know the roads. I know the paths. No gauger's going to find me, right? Because now I can slip all the way through here, and I get to the point where I need to go. Another way that they smuggled, which was brilliant, which is called the smuggler's cask. Now, look how this thing is constructed. Right? So I've got this thing on its side. I've got the bunghole up here. I've got 2 structures on the inside that come from the bunghole all the way out to the edge of the cask on each side. In the middle, I put water. I put some low-tax wine or something like that. So if a gauger finds me, he opens up the bung. He sticks his gauging stick in there, but he can't find any partitions because the partition goes all the way down to the heads on the bottom. And he goes, okay, yeah, you're good. You're on your way. Meanwhile, you've got actually your booze up here in the other compartments. Friggin' brilliant, right? Jesus.
That's innovation against taxes.
There you go.
The antithesis of that, the taxes.
Exactly. Right.
Is what's spurring them on.
If you want me to actually to innovate, take money away from me. Right. And there you go. Right. And then finally, what happened is that in 1832, as we all know, they passed the first excise tax that legitimized whiskey distilling in Scotland, which means now you got a license. Now you can actually afford to actually make this better and create a whole other revenue stream. So these guys who were formerly smugglers are now logistics guys. They're like the beginning of DHL, right?
Right.
So now I know
They know
how
the routes.
Huh?
They know the routes.
They know the routes. They know all the ships coming from Aberdeen down into Edinburgh. They know now they got train lines going from the lowlands into the highlands. They know how to all get this done, but they also have to have warehouses to hold on to this. If I hold on to this in warehouses and I hold on to it and I can't get rid of it, I'm losing money. So eventually what you do is you end up putting what? A retail shop out in front of that. Cadenheads. Cadenheads, that's our next whiskey here. This is the Tullibardine. They were the first independent bottler in Scotland. But what you see what happened is that they evolved from smugglers to logistics guys to warehousemen to actually, let me sell this out here in the marketplace. Gordon MacPhail, Signatory, and we have now many, many different types of independent bottlers, but this was their beginning, right? Their beginning was in the whole smuggling aspect of it right now. What you're tasting right here is the Tullibardine, 12-year-old. One of the things about independent bottlers that we all know is that they typically get access to whiskeys that we can't get commercially because most malt distilleries don't sell their whiskeys commercially in bottles. They sell it only to actually just send it off, to the blending houses, right? So, and then they will also, buy oddball casks and things like that, and they put their name on it, and then they put the provenance and the heritage of it underneath. So this is the Tullibardine right here. They're really kind of a lovely, and again, up until about 7 years ago, no one heard about Tullibardine. They had never come out into the marketplace. They only recently have come out in the marketplace on their own. And then Blair Athol, and you have all of these other blend components, that are now with independent bottlers are now actually showing up as bottles that we can buy.
Yeah, I tell a lot of people you can't get it that way. The only way you can get it is from an independent bottler.
From an IB. That's it. Pretty much it. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Try finding Glen Talkers.
Yeah.
From anything else.
I've done a barrel of it myself.
There you go. Right.
I love it.
So now Canada. These guys were industrial might. Henry Corby, Joseph Seagram, Harry Hatch, a name you need to know, Sam Bronfman, William Gooderham, and tragically his brother-in-law, James Warts, Hiram Walker, and then J.P. Weiser. When you looked, and of course in the back there was Molson's, because that was the first distillery in Canada. Right? Molson's actually started a distillery. First, what you do is you start a brewery, right? And as we all know, beer is just immature whiskey. So you're eventually going to go out there and you're going to start distilling it. William Molson hands over the business to his two sons. One son gets into it really big. The other son says, I'm just going to stick with the brewery. The other son gets, distilling. But it lasted not even a whole generation before they said, we're not done. We're done with this, right? Because here comes Gooderham and Warts, right? Gooderham and Warts, you know what they did? They took the early coffee still, and these two guys had refined it to make rosin oil. And they took the rosin, it's called the Riley patent. They took the rosin oil patent, and they used that to make whiskey. And now they're making whiskey at such a high rate. Right? They're making strong whiskey and they're getting it out there much quicker than anybody else. They become the first massive industrialists. Joseph Seagram starts out as a clerk. He gets into a fist fight. He smacks some guy. He ends up having to leave there, go to another place, and it was a grain farm, and they also had a little bit of distilling. Within 10 years, he takes over as the major stockholder in the entire thing, gets rid of the grain farm, and it's 100% Joseph Seagram's and Sons Distilling. right? You got Hiram Walker that came from Boston, ended up going over to Detroit, which was a boom town at that point, but realizes right across the river in Windsor, Canada, there's the transcontinental train that was just made there. That's my route to market. And I got these temperance people breathing down my back right here. I'm moving my operation, Hiram Walker, right? All of these guys, what they did, and if you look at this map right here, I mapped out where all of their distilleries were. That's essentially the offensive line of Canadian whiskey right on the border of the United States. So you can understand why during Prohibition, they were such a force. They were right there, right? And this guy named Harry Hatch, I got a story about him in the book, but you got to look up this guy. This guy was brilliant because he was the first real gangster. He was the first real gangster. And why no one has actually named a whiskey after him, I don't know why, And so for that, what we have is the whiskey we're going to actually commemorate that with is this Wiser's. Wiser's 18-year-old. Now, what they do in Canada, this is double column distilled. Double column distilled, and then it's run through a doubler. Oh, guess what? The doubler in Kentucky, that wasn't invented in Kentucky. It was invented by Joseph Seagram, right? They use that a lot in Canada, right? This is 100% corn whiskey, and I'm always blown away about how good this whiskey is as 100% corn. But, they know what the hell they're doing up here, and the guy who really knows what he's doing just celebrated his 30th anniversary with them. This is Dr. Don Livermore. Has anybody met Dr. Don? What an incredible guy, right? A brilliant. He just celebrated his 30th year with Hiram Walker, and Hiram Walker, which is owned by Pernod Ricard. Hiram Walker now makes all of the Corby line, all of Wiser's, right? They make Canadian Club, even though Canadian Club is actually owned by Suntory, right? But everything is made there, and everything kind of comes underneath his province. And he's like one of the most brilliant guys in whiskey, and people need to know more about Canadian whiskey because it's just, some of it's just absolutely brilliant,
I have a conversation with Dr. Don. Is amazing.
Oh, dude. I was lucky enough. I spent a day with him. Up in Ontario, up in Windsor. We spent the day together. He took me literally through everything. You were talking about geosmin earlier, about the smell of geosmin, which is corn that has gone bad. There's one woman at the Hiram Walker distillery when all of the trucks pull up, right? They send the probes down into the middle of the truck. They pull out a sample, and it runs past her nose.
Yeah, and it doesn't.
And if he smells geosmin, send it down to the ethanol factory. You don't want anything to do with it here. Right. So this
take over the entire thing.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. So then we go, so the whole idea is we saw this whole thing here where, distillation goes all the way back into antiquity, goes all the way back into the Egyptians, into that part of the world that, of course, we look at now as like, they didn't know what they were doing. They knew everything about what they were doing, but that was really where the secrets of really civilization kind of started. And remember what distillation is, right? All we're doing is we're taking something, we are going to heat it, we are going to separate it, and we are going to capture. That's essentially what it is. Heat, separate, capture. That's what this device does over here. Heats, separates, captures. That's what that whole the worm tub is. And as part of my honoring Julio's, I want you to take a look at that map over there on the wall. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's really Scotch whiskey. So everything you've heard about the 5 areas of Scotland, no, that's wrong. This is what's correct. And
he still has the shirt.
Yeah, I got the shirt. I got the shirt. Yeah. Yeah. Hell yeah.
I'll give you a poster. We got a poster. You don't have to wear it. You got a poster. All right.
Surrender shirt. No, I'm all over it. Yeah. What this is right here, that is the blending map from a company called UDV, which was one of the things that eventually became Diageo. And essentially what that's showing you is that because blended whiskey has to be consistent, I have to make sure that I can get these flavors from the same distilleries. But what if I go to the GlenDronach and they're not giving me the barrels that I need? I just run down the red track and I can pick up some from Tumnavalin, right? And I can use that in my blend. This is the true map of Scotch whiskey. So get the t-shirt.
I don't have any t-shirts anymore.
Okay. Well,
I get a poster. We got posters. We got posters.
There you go. Right. So it's all about, heat, separate, and capture.
You can buy the posters framed, by the way. It's not very expensive.
Oh, there you go. Right. And so that brings us all the way back then to the beginning. And wouldn't you know it, to a place called India. And every time you talk to someone about Indian single malts, they look at you like you've got like 16 eyes, right? But that was one of the places where this all started. In that entire empire back there, they were doing the early separate, heat, capture type of methodology right there. And wouldn't you know it, as it comes back into India, it comes back in the form of a man. The last name is Jagdal, and he was trained as a pharmacist, a person who blends and compounds, right? And they start something in India, which was very well known in the early part of the 20th century, which was called IMFL, Indian Made Foreign Liquor. It's essentially highly processed molasses run through 5-column multi-pressure stills and then blended with whatever type of bulk of spirits they could buy from Scotland, Ireland, Canada, the United States, or whatever. And then they sell it in juice boxes. And that's essentially poor man's whiskey all over India. And then there's a couple of them that are here, like I can't remember the names of them right now.
Who did the worst whiskey I ever had?
Yeah.
What do you think Antiquity is?
There you go. Antiquity.
It's called Antiquity.
Yeah, that's an IMFL.
That was a part of that. We had a tasting of the worst whiskey I ever had.
I saw that. Yeah, right.
And that was in there.
So what happens is that Jagdal's son, Neil Jagdal, starts to see what's going on in the whiskey world. He's starting to see, wow, single malts are becoming a thing. And, oh, there you go. Wow. And just so you know, it's rare premium whiskey. All right. So I don't want any bad, a blend of rare Scotch and matured Indian malts. And what they don't tell you is it's mostly.
Nope. Open it up.
Oh, geez. Oh, good.
Oh, no. Open it up.
Okay.
Get the bottle. Now read the front of the bottle.
Rare premium whiskey, a whiskey of fine lineage, right? Distilled from, oh, here we go. Brilliant. Distilled from sugarcane molasses, produced, distilled, and blended in India by Shaw Wallace Distilleries Limited. So there you go. Right. It's molasses. It's rum. Right? Highly distilled rum, right? Blended with other things in there.
Hey, you want a cup? There you go.
I don't need it. I got it. Right. Just remember, it's premium. Okay.
It's premium.
All right.
So that used to be the, we had to get rid of it because there's, you can't haze anymore. You used to have to drink that.
Hazing.
That was the hazing.
That was a hazing.
We had to get rid of that.
So
Randall always took it too far.
So what Jagdal's son does is he sees the rise of single malts in Scotland. He goes, hey, we've been making whiskey for a long time. Let's make good whiskey finally. And that's what he does. And so when Amrut first came out onto the marketplace, it started winning all of Best Whiskey Awards in Scotland. And when people ask me all the time, this is their brand new distillery right here, but this was the old distillery. This old distillery right here, which is in Bangalore, was their old rum distillery right here, their old rum still. And when people ask me all the time, what's your favorite whiskey? I always say, well, it's the one that's in my glass when I'm drinking it. But I can tell you that this whiskey right here is probably one in my top 5. This is Amrut Fusion right here. This is a brilliant whiskey, which is 75% barley, Indian grown barley that is unpeated. They bring in 25% Scottish peated malt. They do everything in Scotland, but what they do is they take the Scottish malt and they grind, they ferment, they distill, age that separately. They take the Indian malt, they do the same thing separately. They age them separately. They've got 12 to 14% angel share. So you have to take those things out of the barrels quickly.
To be young.
And then once they do that, then they blend them together and then they put it back into an ex-bourbon barrel and let it marry for another 6 months. I love this whiskey right here. So this is Amrut Fusion. And I think that's a good way to actually end the tasting.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
that was
my
great.
pleasure, man.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Robin, thanks,
Thank
man.
you.
Thanks. That was great.
Thanks so much. Yeah.
There's Alex.
So I'm going to be signing copies of the book because you're all going to want one now, right?
Get the book. You get the book now. We do have them now. They will also be here tonight if you're coming tonight. Robin will do a personal signing on it too. So we'll probably have you do that upstairs because we're going to start flipping the room.
Sounds good.
All right.
Right. Thanks everybody.
Thanks everybody. Thanks for coming. This will be on our Facebook page. It's the Liquor Talking, and you can find it on Spotify too.